All right, guys, we got a new section to the America Happens website called the Whistleblowers Forum, where you could go on there and anonymously or using your name post anything that you want and contact other whistleblowers to talk about what's really going on out there. All right, guys, welcome to the latest episode of Blood Money. Today we have a very special guest. Again, today we have a whistleblower, and relating to one of our very, very favorite topics of late. This is about the Riverside County Sheriff's Department and Sheriff Chad Bianco and how things are really run in those neck of the woods. And as you all know, I was falsely accused of being a third assassin. And the more and more we dive into what is happening in the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, as you guys have seen on the Blood Money podcast across many episodes, the more we find out that perhaps everything is not quite so kosher over there. So, sir, how you doing?
All right, yourself then?
Good, good. Thank you. Thank you. So, just let's go right into it right now. You are tell us who you are as much as you're allowed to tell us, and then take us right into some of the things that you want to inform us about.
Yeah, so I have been a employee with the sheriff's department, more specifically a deputy sheriff with Riverside County Sheriff's Department for a little over 20 years. And as a member of that department and with that kind of time on, you tend to experience things, see things, witness things, hear things that are verifiable that don't sit well with you. And I'm sure as I'm talking about these things, people are going to be shocked to hear some of these things and wonder, why hasn't this person spoken up yet, et cetera. Well, the problem is when you work in a department that has such deep-seated corruption and control over their employees, if you were to ever bump up against that system, you would likely find yourself unemployed or even worse, maybe charged with a crime that you're not guilty of. There's a whole system of things that they have access to that they use to intimidate these people in the department that, for all intents and purposes, just want to see the department doing good things for the public, seeing that we are financed by the public through taxes. So that's where I'm going to be talking about today, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that are going to be interested in this.
What's interesting is that you talk about the retaliation being as bad as criminal charges, which is something that I've heard. I've actually read articles about. I can't remember the gentleman's name off the top of my head, but he was certainly claiming, and there seemed to be a lot of people supporting his claims, that they had falsely accused him of criminal things. And he was a former deputy in Riverside as well. So, something that we keep hearing about, but, keep going. Tell us, what happened.
All right, so I'm going to take us back probably about 12 years back now. And now some people are going to say, well, what does this have to do with Chad Bianco? Well, he's been a member of this department for a long time, and he is aware of the type of corruption that has been going on, and he's refused to do anything about it. In fact, it's only gotten worse under his tenure. So going back about 12 years, there is a sheriff's investigator that is still employed with the sheriff's department. He's been around for about 25 years. This man's name is Adonis Glasper. Now, Adonis is unique in the sense that this man is married. He has about 5 or 6 children. You wouldn't know that if you worked with the guy. He tends to be very nefarious on duty. He has multiple affairs on duty. And mind you, now with recent passing of laws in the last couple of years, even if you have consensual sexual encounters on duty, that is a charge for sex or what they call rape under color of authority, even if it's with your significant other. Now, this person's case, Adonis Glasper, it's not ever with his significant other. He has been known as pretty much being a predator with a badge for his entirety of his career. Now, he's had multiple written memorandums against him to counsel him in the way that he interacts with the dispatchers in our department, with the female deputies, extremely inappropriate comments. We have a system that we use for our dispatching system. It's a CAD system, computer aided dispatch. And on that system, you can send messages. Now, these messages are kept pretty much for the entirety of the age of the system for auditing reasons in case they need to go back and check things. For example, maybe they have an investigator who's a potential sexual predator and is extremely inappropriate with other women. Now, despite this and having it been documented multiple times, the department has never done anything with this man. I don't know if it has to do with his racial background. He is um, half black, and I don't know what his other heritage is. Maybe he's half white, but the department tends to steer away from disciplining people that are of any color other than white for the most part. And that's pretty well documented with the department. I mean, we have a lot of issues where people that probably shouldn't have been disciplined, they're disciplined in lieu of the other person that maybe was on scene at a crime just because that person has a dark complexion or a different last name that's more ethnic. Now, to get back to Glasper, it doesn't only end with the fact that he has been an absolute menace towards the women in the department. And, I'm sure his wife is aware of these activities because this has been going on for a long time. But I used to work graveyard with this guy, working the night shift. And, you tend to sit next to these guys in your units and they start talking, people get tired at 2 or 3 in the morning. They start wanting to talk about their personal life or what have you. And one night we were sitting there talking and he decides to confide in me that he finds it funny that the department would hire a gangbanger. And I thought he was alluding to somebody else. And I'm like, well, what do you mean by that? And so this guy grew up in the Midwest area of the country. I don't know which state exactly, but he tells me to my face that he used to be a member of the Latin Kings gang. Now, one of the automatic disqualifiers for being in law enforcement is if you've ever had any gang ties. Usually, a gang association is enough to have you disqualified. But the fact that this guy is admitting that he was a gang banger, potentially a member of the Latin Kings, that's a huge red flag. So naturally, I kind of scoffed it off and laughed, and I said, "Well, I don't think that's real. I mean, how did you pass a background check if you was some member of a gang?" And he just kind of laughed about it with his usual snide attitude and said, "Man, this department doesn't even know everything that you fucking did when you were a kid." So that's a huge red flag. So being that I thought maybe he was just kind of joshing around, trying to sound cool for the evening or something, I asked him to go further into that, and he was like, "No, man." He goes, I'm being 100% honest with you." He goes, um, I got caught up in a drug house one time with his gang, and his specific role with this gang when he was a youngster was if they had received word from the people that were lookouts on the street, he was to gather all of the firearms in his house and then run out the back into the alleyway. So naturally, trap houses like that, they get hit by the police all the time. This actually happened, and he was caught by law enforcement when he was going out the back door. He said that he was giving him an opportunity or a chance to try to somewhat correct his life. And he was told that he needed to join a Marine Corps or potentially go to jail for some very serious crimes. Now, ultimately, it sounds like he chose the route of the Marine Corps because he's a veteran now and he received some abnormal amount of money claiming that he has all types of ailments, but yet he's still employed as a deputy sheriff investigator, which requires you to be in somewhat good physical condition. Additionally, going back to this time frame, when I used to work graveyard with him, there was an evening where one of my beat partners called me very concerned and said, "Hey, man, my patrol car was having issues. I had to go turn it in." Now, something to know about Riverside County Sheriff, at least for the stations that, majority of the stations, unless you're on a specialized team or that, you don't get any kind of assigned patrol car. The way it works is you show up, there's a list of cars, there's keys hanging in a room, you grab what you can, and then you go out for the day. But you have to write down in this log which unit you're using. And they do that for reasons, say there's a evidence found or you leave something behind of your own that you can get back to that person. Well, my partner calls me extremely distressed and he tells me, "Hey, man, I was loading up this other patrol car and I found 185 grams of heroin in a bag in the front passenger seat." Now, that might not seem too significant to somebody that maybe doesn't understand law enforcement. They go, "Well, maybe it belongs to some suspect." Well, anytime an arrest is made, especially something of that caliber, back in this time frame, possession of methamphetamine and heroin was still a felony. So possession of that much heroin would be possession for the intent to sell that heroin. So that would have been a big news arrest in our station, and nobody had made any arrests of that kind, at least probably in a long, like 6 or 7 months before that, long time. And these cars are driven hard and every day. Multiple people drive these cars every day. Somebody would have seen this. And if this was part of somebody's case, if there was evidentiary value to somebody's case, they most definitely would have been in trouble for losing their only evidence that was part of their case. Now, some naysayers may also say, "Well, what about some suspect in the back of the seat that is trying to ditch some drugs and decides to try to jam them through the fence that separates the front patrol officers from the suspects in the rear?" However, this was tried. Um, Both the sergeant and the deputy tried to see if it was possible that this would even fit in between, and there was no possible way because it's a very tight seal for reasons like this to make sure that this does not happen. So naturally, they said, "Well, we need to check the logbook." And the last person that drove that car was Adonis Glasper. Now, in any kind of police show or movie, what would naturally happen next? Maybe some kind of investigation. Maybe they would take that baggie and try to submit it for some kind of fingerprints or some DNA to find out what's really going on. Because there's obviously a concern now that maybe this person that lost this is possessing it for nefarious reasons, such as planting drugs on unsuspecting individuals. Well, to kind of give you a detail about that time frame as well, in regards to Adonis Glasper, he had previously been assigned to the Coachella Valley Narcotics Task Force, where it's a street level narcotics task force. He was just coming off of that team. And while he was on that team, he was going hard after a drug cartel family that's very well known, especially in the Coachella Valley, but they're very well known in Mexico too. There's a family that's tied to the Felix Arellano cartel in Mexico, and they have associates and members of that family that operate on the United States territory side, and a lot of them do live in the Coachella Valley. So it is not too far fetched to think that during one of the search warrants, when they served on this family, that he was able to acquire some of this heroin so that he may have a chance if, say, they do serve a search warrant and they don't find any drugs, but they find a lot of money and guns and things that without the presence of dope, they would have no evidentiary value. You understand what I'm saying? So,
Yep, totally.
so then when he gets back to patrol after his assignment and his appointment to this Coachella Valley Narcotics Task Force, he is astonishingly making drug possession arrests, mostly only heroin, sometimes 3 or 4 times a night. Now, that's not very normal when it comes to patrol. Sometimes, if you're lucky and you're out there really hitting and shaking the bushes, you might come across maybe 2 people a night. But that's if you're really out there hustling, because then you got to do paperwork. You got to go book these people into jail. You got to deal with the evidence. I mean, this is not a quick process like you would assume from watching TV, where they just walk into the jail, throw the guy in a cell, and then leave. It's not how things work, at least in Riverside County. And suddenly, after the finding of this 185 grams of heroin, he was no longer making these nightly arrests anymore. Now, any good investigator or even just a cop, a street cop, can look at that and say something's wrong here. And again, I don't know if it had to do with his nationality, his background, his racial background, etc., or if maybe he had friends in high places, but that was never investigated. They simply took that evidence that was found in that patrol car by my partner. They booked it in for a thing called safekeeping. They didn't even book it as any kind of evidence, and it just disappeared. Nothing ever came of this. So there's some serious issues there, because it's possible, like I was saying earlier, possession of drugs back then was still a felony. There is likely somebody still in custody. Maybe they were on parole, maybe they were three striker, etc. And this Adonis Glasper arrested them and could have likely ruined their life, and they could be still sitting in prison. So, you know, it's not that hard to go back and do simple freedom of information request and try to look at these arrests to find out this time frame, and to really actually, this could still be investigated by the Department of Justice if they actually cared. Um, and I think it should be looked at, because this person is in a position of trust, and he has been promoted to the position of investigator, and he's in charge of touching all types of evidence, whether that be sex crime evidence. We're talking about rape kits, whether that's money being found on narcotics investigations or homicide investigations, or any investigation where people tend to hoard money in their houses or their cars because they don't trust the government, or because they've earned those proceeds through ill-gotten gains, so they don't put that money in the bank because they don't want to be paying taxes on it and have to show where they got that money from. This person is probably still out there just creating absolute havoc. And he's doing it because he has the power of the badge and the oath that he took in Riverside County. So that's a huge problem. And I really do hope that somebody that listens to this, maybe somebody that works for DOJ that is concerned with these allegations, takes the time to actually look into this, because this person does not deserve to be walking free if they're out there planting drugs on people. And, this isn't the only type of stuff he would do. That's the most egregious, of course. But, there was multiple times where I would pull up to his traffic stops at 2 or 3 in the morning. And just a natural conversation you have with your beat partners when you're doing this kind of stuff on a daily basis, and you're doing, 20, 30 traffic stops a night, is when you go up to back them up, you'll ask them, "Oh, hey man, what do you got? Like, is it DUI? Is it drugs, guns, gangs? What do you have going on here? And why did you stop the car?" Because you want to be able to, if you're going to end up having to write some kind of supplemental report, you need to have the same information that they have, so that you can make sure that your report is reflecting the truth. Well, he would oftentimes say he didn't have anything yet, meaning he had no probable cause to stop these cars, but that he would eventually find something. Again, these are types of arrests that, there's when you talk about law, there's the fruit of the poisonous tree. And there are likely hundreds of arrests that have resulted from Adonis Glasper that are a fruit of a poisonous tree, meaning these people, anything found at the offset of these traffic stops, would be thrown out because they were found illegally. because he's just out there pulling people over, hoping for the best and hoping that he can find probable cause after the fact, which is completely against the law. So, you know, he's definitely a problem, and I'm hoping that in the near future that there's going to be some kind of resolve as it comes to this, because I guarantee you, if that's one person that I worked with and that I came across in my career, then there's definitely more. And, you know, for people that take an oath, that wear that badge, that need to be trusted by the public, this guy has completely abandoned his oath and given up on providing a service that he's entitled to give to the public. So, do you have any questions about any of that as far as it relates to this man?
Yeah, I mean, which station and department does this individual work in?
So, he spent most of his career in what we call the East End of the county. So, we used to have a station in Indio. That station has now changed to the thermal station. And that's the same station that was tasked primarily with dealing with the Coachella venue where you were falsely arrested and accused. And he also spent time at the Palm Desert station and then different team assignments. Like I was telling you, he worked on a narcotics team. He worked on a station level team in the city of La Quinta. So, you know, he's been around a while, and he's had a lot of access to different members of the public in all different facets. And now I believe he's still assigned to the thermal station as a investigator. And like I said, the investigators, depending on when you're on call and who's assigned to be on call, he could be handling any level of investigation. That could be child molestation, that could be rapes, that could be robberies, that could be homicides, anything that requires a little bit more experience and expertise, where the on-duty sergeant will decide, hey, you know what, we should get an investigator out here. He can have access to all of these cases, which means it's likely that he has been near cases that have just completely tainted evidence and very poor judgment on his behalf, which could destroy cases and potentially ruin victims' lives if they do investigate him, determine that he is a completely corrupt individual who should not be wearing a badge. That could definitely ruin some cases, because any suspect in custody could look at that and say, well, I want my case looked at. Why is this man out here planting drugs? Why is this man out here sexually harassing women? And now he's the lead investigator on this sex crime case. What makes him the foremost responsible person to investigate something like that when he's out here doing nefarious duties on, actions on duty? And it's been reported multiple times that he's had sex with multiple women while he's been on duty. So it's definitely a problem, and you know he needs to be looked at seriously, though, like a serious inquiry from an agency that oversees local law enforcement.
Wow, like so okay, this is in thermal station. All this definitely strikes a chord because it's see, I never knew this sort of thing existed. This idea of arresting somebody and then trying to figure out a crime or frame that person after you've already arrested him. But that's very much what was happening with me and this whole third assassin nonsense that Bianco and his deputy Coronado tried to make up. Then once I start putting the word out there that we're doing a deeper dive into who this Bianco is, because word starts getting to me that he is a very bad sheriff that uses his badge under the color of law and does all sorts of corrupt things. A lot of people start coming forward and giving us further information of this sort of thing happening. So this sort and you know, we're talking about thermal station where I wasn't even allowed to make my one phone call after I was unlawfully arrested, and that's a whole different story. On October 12th. So this seems like a normal thing that's happening there. I mean, tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so luckily for most of my career, I didn't really see much um, corruption going around as far as that. This guy was he stood out like a sore thumb because his actions were so obvious, and the things that he would say just were really bad. I mean, to the point where when you hear this stuff, you kind of take a step back and go, "Wow, like why are you bragging about being a gangbanger in your previous life?" I mean, that's completely absurd because had that come up in a background investigation, he would have been disqualified immediately. And the reason for that being, I mean, look at most people that are involved in gangs. Their allegiance is to the gang. A lot of these guys don't think before they act. They act on impulse and violence. And the fact that he's out there, walking around with a gun and a badge and just kind of ruling with an iron fist like it's his own kingdom, that's a huge problem. And I know for a fact that there's other people out there. The problem is, having people come forward like I'm doing now to really help expose this stuff and to try to actually clean up the ranks from within from the sheriff's department. The problem is we have a huge problem with I wouldn't necessarily call well, it is a problem with DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, but even outside of just saying DEI, I'm talking about specifically related to when people don't have a last name that's Smith, for example, or Miller in your case. Um, they're quick to go after these people for things that are completely pointless and they have no bearing on anything and related to the job. There's no crime, etc. But when you have people with maybe an ethnic last name or their skin tone's a little bit darker, these people are left alone because the department doesn't want to go down that road and potentially open themselves up to a racial discrimination lawsuit. So they just kind of let it go. And this has been going on for a while in regards to that. It's becoming a cancer within the department, and I really hope that more people are going to start coming forward and trying to voice their concerns and bringing out the evidence and showing, hey, look, we have a problem that's been rooted in corruption for a long time, and hopefully somebody takes it serious.
Yeah, I would hope so too. I would hope so too. What are you? What I mean, tell me, is there anything else you wanted to talk about in terms of your knowledge about the inner workings of the Riverside County Sheriff's Department? Is there anything worth talking about?
Oh yeah. So I need to bring up a case that dates back about dates back about 10, 11 years. Now, my knowledge of this case is very intimate in the fact that one of the people involved in this case was a best friend of mine for a long time, even prior to both of us getting into law enforcement. So the information that I have is firsthand, and because of the egregious nature of this, I imagine that this would warrant a Department of Justice inquiry on some level to find out the real facts behind this. So this case in particular involves a former deputy sheriff that used to work for the department. He was ultimately fired for some nefarious on-duty activity. They tend to keep a lot of this stuff under wraps, so I don't know the exact reasons he was terminated, but that has nothing to do with the case that I'm going to explain to you now. So this happened in Riverside County Sheriff's Department, and this individual, Robert Vega, he was a deputy sheriff at the Lake Elsinore station. Now, you familiar with the whole jurisdiction of Riverside County? It extends all the way out to the Colorado River in Blythe. So we have a very large area. Now, this subject, he was on a specialty assignment. And what that means is basically, he made a name for himself on patrol and proceeded to get appointed to a station level team. While on this team, he comes across an investigation where they suspect a suspect that lives in this trailer to be selling meth from this trailer. So him and his partners, they do a whole workup on this guy, meaning they run his record, they start doing surveillance. And I don't know if they did any undercover controlled drug buys from him or not, or maybe they used any kind of informants, which is pretty common for the sheriff's department in drug investigations. And ultimately, they end up getting a search warrant signed. Now, when it comes to serving search warrants with Riverside County Sheriff's Department, there is a whole plethora of forms and pre-planning that goes into this stuff, which would be what we call an operational packet. Now, in this operational packet, you're going to have the name of the team, the date that you're going to serve the search warrant, the date that the search warrant was approved by a judge. And there's also this thing called a search warrant SWAT checkoff. Now, SWAT, Special Weapons and Tactics, our SWAT team goes by a different phrase, but for the general knowledge, I'm just speaking about SWAT teams in general. Now, one of the boxes that needs to be checked or not checked if it doesn't exist on this SWAT checklist is, are firearms suspected to be on the premises, and has the suspect threatened to use them against law enforcement? Now, my buddy of mine used to be, um, he told me in confidence, he was actually bragging about it, which I found to be pretty disturbing, that him and his partners had gained information about the suspect having firearms. So they knew there was firearms for a fact, and that he had threatened that if his house was ever hit by the police or searched by the police, etc., that he would go out shooting because he had a criminal record, he wasn't going to go to prison, etc. And you've probably heard this before, people yelling, "I ain't ever going back," that kind of thing. So imagine that's this kind of person, and he's a drug dealer, and most street level drug dealers are also using. So when they're using, they're not in a great frame of mind, and they're going to act erratic, especially during a search warrant service. Search warrant service is loud, and you got multiple cars. Sometimes you have a canine there. Sometimes, if you're lucky, you can request a air support unit. Well, on this particular day, they end up serving the search warrant. They do the typical, what we call knock and notice, and that's pursuant to a specific penal code 1531, which requires law enforcement agents to knock, announce who they are, and that they have a search warrant. And if people don't come to the door, you're authorized to then smash the door down, kick the door down, whatever tools you have available. Well, in this particular situation, they knew all this stuff and they decided not to check that box. And the reason they did not check that box is, despite having the information that this guy had firearms and he was willing to use them against law enforcement, was they wanted to serve it because they were hoping that he might try to pull something like that. And they wanted the case to be completely sealed off, so just them doing it, and they weren't going to try to tie in SWAT. So they lied on this form. Well, lo and behold, they make entry into the residence after not getting any answer at the door. Sure enough, the guy grabs a gun and he takes two shotgun slugs, one through the leg and then one through the chest, and he's dead. So we now have a dead civilian who, for all intents and purposes, may still be alive if the SWAT team had served this search warrant. Because what the SWAT team would do when something meets the requirement of a SWAT level search warrant service, they do what they call surround and call out. That's the most go-to service of search warrants now. Is it's safer. They use drones. They fly them in the house. They didn't have the drones back then, but they have robots. They have all these tools that they can use so that everybody's safe, including the suspect. Yeah, is he selling drugs? Of course. But does that mean he needs to be executed inside of his home because these deputies refuse to follow protocol so that they hope that maybe he'll pull a gun and create some kind of situation where they have to shoot him? No, that's not okay by any stretch of the imagination. Now, when my friend at the time told me this, I was blown away. And I told him, I was like, Robert, this isn't okay, man. Like you guys lied on the form. You know, what happens when this gets found out? What happens when this guy's family puts up a fight and wants to find out all the details behind this? I mean, people don't keep secrets forever. And, you know, I wasn't there. I didn't even work at that station. So that was one of those things where I was like, man, I don't know what to do with this information. And it's just been sitting with me. And it disgusts me that this guy, along with his other team members, would lie on this form. And then ultimately, as a result of their lie, would get somebody killed. And not just get killed, but they're the ones that killed him. I mean, that's despicable. By any stretch of the imagination, there's no way you can tell me that's justifiable homicide by a peace officer. So that situation there, I feel needs another look by the Department of Justice on some level. Because if it's true, because I guarantee you at this point, nobody that knows the truth about that situation would have any allegiance to any of those guys still. And maybe they've moved on in their life, they're no longer in law enforcement, et cetera. But this information is all easy to find. You know, you do a FOIA request for a specific incident where a member of the community was killed by law enforcement, you're going to get all the names of these people, and they'll be easy to find because I'm sure probably half or more of them are probably still in law enforcement. But this is some deep-seated issues. The fact that this person, Robert Vega, and the other team members assigned to this team felt that they could even do this and get away with it, that speaks to the level of corruption that is going on in the department where people feel like there's no accountability. I mean, to just blatantly lie on a document, and the reason that they have all these documents is in the instance that something does happen, say a shooting, an Oscar involved shooting, like which occurred on this case where somebody died, you know, that all becomes court record. So now these forms are part of a court record. They don't have the proper box checked because these guys lied, and a man lost his life because of that. And obviously, I'm not defending drug dealers whatsoever, but I have arrested more than my fair share of drug dealers in my career, and I've never hoped that they would grab a gun so that I could execute them in their home. You tracking where I'm at on that?
100%. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much they were hoping to execute the guy.
Exactly. And they did. You know, that person, you know, as they say, dead men tell no tales. So, of course, this guy can't tell his side of the story. And, you know, my my old friend of mine, the one that was involved in this, Robert Vega, you know, he justified it to me, not just through the fact that they wanted to do it, etc. He said, well, you know, when the investigators searched his property, they found some freshly moved dirt in his backyard. And when they checked that area and they dug it up, they found a tin can or some kind of container that had I think it was locks of women's hair and possibly panties in there. So in his mind, he's like, "Oh, we got rid of a possible rapist, pedophile, maybe serial killer, etc." I mean, they don't know. They never did really much deep digging on what those pieces of evidence were or who they belonged to. But in his mind, he was trying to justify it to me when he told me this because I was giving him pushback, like, "Dude, this is not okay, man." And he was like, "Well, you know, they found this in his backyard. Like, we probably did society a favor." Maybe. But what if these people were really victims? What if maybe actually interviewing this guy and having him in custody and getting blood samples from this guy, etc., would have opened up some cases and would have given some victims some closure or some families of victims. What if this guy was killing people? What if he was out there raping women. That he was so blinded by trying to justify his reasons for what he did that he can't even see the fact that if this guy was alive, that first of all, he wouldn't have been murdered for no reason. But second of all, they could have potentially identified some victims and actually helped some people, which is what law enforcement is supposed to do. We're supposed to provide a service to people that have been victimized. So it really doesn't sit well with me, and I'm just glad that you have the ability to have a venue where you can get some of this out in a proper way that maybe will actually incite people's minds to want to do the right thing from here on forward. Because I think law enforcement has been a festering tumor for a long time, especially when we're talking about Riverside County Sheriff's Department. And nobody is willing to do the right thing and stand up and actually voice the concerns and the illegal activities that are going on. So yeah, I mean, it's it's a lot, I know, but I think it needs to get out there.
Really crazy revelations and stuff. Is there anything? I mean, is there anything else you wanted to talk about that you want to
Yeah,
explore?
so now that we're done talking about some historical information that speaks to the corruption and the just the filth that is spreading far and wide within the department. Um, we can talk about the poor decision making and the poor choices that have come directly from Sheriff Chad Bianco and the people that he has chosen to promote. Now, I would like to start with the subject. This man is Sergeant William Feebig. Now, Sergeant William Feebig is a mess. He's a nice enough guy, but he's not all that intelligent. He is an alcoholic, a very bad alcoholic, actually. And he has risen to the rank of sergeant within the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, which he was promoted to under the tenure of Chad Bianco. Now, this is going to speak to the decision making of Chad Bianco because certain things should not be allowed to go unnoticed or to continue when you're given a position of power, let alone as a law enforcement officer, but also when you're a supervisor. Now, Sergeant William Feebig, he's a sergeant with the Sheriff's Department, and prior to that, he was a member of the Secret Service. You know them, the ones who failed Trump on July 13th. So he was a member of the United States Secret Service, and ultimately he fell in love with a woman that he met while on a detail that this woman worked for our department, Riverside County Sheriff's Department. Her name is Kobe Webb. And ultimately, he decided to hang up his hat as a United States Secret Service agent and lateral his law enforcement experience over to Riverside County Sheriff's Department, probably about, let's say, 18, 20 years ago. Now, he was promoted by Chad Bianco himself, and it just goes to show the kind of people that he's willing to promote. So this guy, after he got promoted, he was a sergeant for several years, and he got arrested for driving under the influence of alcohol. Now, one of the things they do in our agency is when you get into a DUI, there's things they can do. They could demote you if you have rank. They could fire you because you committed a crime, especially if you're found guilty of that crime. Because again, everybody's innocent until proven guilty, correct? So um, instead, he was not demoted, he was not fired, etc. When he was found guilty of his DUI, he was reassigned to the courthouse in the Indio area, which is out there by the Coachella Valley, where your erroneous arrest took place. Now, while he was there, he became a problem. He was constantly sexually harassing the females there. This guy's a little over 50. He has no children. He has a child that he doesn't see, but as far as what he says, he doesn't have any children. Um, he just kind of lives his life however the hell he wants, and he'll send inappropriate text messages to the females that work for him, which is against policy because technically the way our policy spells things out, you're not supposed to be fraternizing with your subordinates, and you sure as hell should not be trying to have sex with them or elicit uh, nude pictures of them. But some people don't seem to care about the rules. So while assigned to this courthouse, um, I ended up getting assigned to this courthouse at some point, and we became friends. And what I mean by friends is this guy had the same kind of outlook on the department as I have, which is that there's problems within it and that the leadership is terrible, but he doesn't want to leave because he just wants to keep collecting that paycheck every 2 weeks. Well, during this time, he would drunk text me all the time at night and after work. And he would just be talking all kinds of shit about the administration and the poor decisions and who they promoted to the chief deputies within the department and just going on and on. And, he has a real problem with female law enforcement to the point where he was constantly voicing, these fucking women, they don't deserve their positions, etc., and just on and on and on. So one of the people that he starts texting me about is one of the chief deputies that was promoted to chief, or rather appointed, because they're an appointed official. Anybody in the administration level that we call the second floor, which is chief deputies, assistant sheriffs, under sheriff, and the sheriff. Now, the one he was texting me about a lot was one. Her name is Misty Reynolds, and Misty Reynolds is her own piece of work. She's had when she was a sergeant, she had sex with multiple subordinates of hers on duty. Everybody knows about it. It was exposed online years ago when Chad Bianco was running for sheriff. And it wasn't because her and Chad actually got along. She actually doesn't like Chad Bianco. That was a very well known fact. However, regardless of that, he still appointed her to a chief deputy position. I think it's more of a keep your enemies closer kind of a thing because they both do not respect each other at all. So while she had been promoted, Feebig is confiding in me one night through text message, and he's talking about how he wishes that somebody would feed her into a wood chipper. I mean, this guy is in a position of trust within the department. He's a supervisor, and at the time, I was his subordinate, and he's over here telling me that he wishes that somebody would shove a chief deputy into a wood chipper simply because he probably feels that she's inferior to him and that he should have that position, etc. It didn't stop there. He went on to talk about a now retired assistant sheriff, Jimenez, that he wanted to physically assault what he says, I think, was to box him. But, he would go on and on and on about this stuff all the time. And then he even decided to bring up his ex-wife because he is no longer with that woman that I told you about, Kobe Webb, that has since retired from the department. I believe she retired at the rank of captain. So while they were married, he refers to her as the crippled bitch in his text messages, and I'll explain that. So while they were married, they had gone on a family vacation and they got into a very bad car wreck in Bend, Oregon. And when that happened, she sustained some severe injuries to her body to the point where she could not really walk that well anymore. Now, normally, in most normal circumstances, someone that is injured to that level that can't even walk without the assistance of a walker or a cane, they would receive a medical retirement just because they're no longer able to do their duties. Even all the way up to the rank of the sheriff. On your badge, it states that you're a deputy sheriff and you carry a firearm. You're expected to do quarterly qualifications, and you need to be in a physical state where you can actually assist people if their lives are in peril, or if your partner's lives are in peril, or maybe you see something while you're driving to work, etc. Well, instead of her receiving any kind of medical retirement, the department decided to promote her several times. Now, you have to wonder, how does somebody who has to walk with a cane and a walker, how are they able to properly fire their firearm and pass a quarterly qualification that the department is mandated to do through the state? Well, a buddy of mine that used to be a range master told me that on the days that she had to qualify, they had strict orders from the sheriff's administration to shut down the entire shooting range, and she would get to sit in a chair and shoot her firearm from the seated position. Now, while that might be a skill that you might need if you were stuck in your car and you get into a gunfight, etc., that is not a normal situation. They don't accommodate anybody when it comes to the gun range ever, because it's too critical of a thing, and too critical of a skill that needs to be kept up. And the requirement for the shooting it requires you to be standing and moving at times. So for them to allow her to shoot from the seated position and just completely subvert not only department policy but the state law that mandates the policies and procedures and firearm qualifications for all law enforcement agencies in the state of California, that's absurd. I don't know if this person, Kobe Webb, if she had maybe she had dirt on somebody in the department and threatened to release that information if she was terminated. But instead of being terminated or allowed to medically retire because of her injuries that she sustained, she was instead promoted multiple times. That's a huge problem. And frankly, what they were doing was illegal. And nobody seemed to care because everybody knew, this goes back to my opening statement with you. If you speak up against the regime and anything that they deem to be appropriate or what they consider to be the norm, because they've now subverted policy and state law to fit their narrative at the time, you will be the one that gets in trouble. You will be the one that's standing in the unemployment line or facing some kind of financial discipline through the department. Now, most people just sit back and go, "It's not even worth it," and that's what I used to hear all the time. Why doesn't anybody say anything about this? It's not worth it. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. Well, what if it was your life on the line? What if you called 911 and the only person in the area at the time was this woman, and you have somebody breaking into your house, you're an 85-year-old woman, and you need assistance, and this person shows up who needs a walking cane, and the only way she knows how to fire her firearm anymore is from a seated position. You're in bad shape. And not only that, she's now an additional issue. What if she gets shot because she can't get her gun out of her holster because she's not in a seated position and she's walking with a cane? Now you have a downed officer who needs to be rescued if they're not dead already. And then on top of that, you have a civilian who has probably already been beat to death or worse. So there's some serious issues that need to be addressed within this department. And I guarantee you this kind of stuff is still going on because nothing has changed. It's only gotten worse. So from there, we go on to a person I mentioned earlier, that Misty Reynolds. Now, Misty Reynolds is a chief deputy with the Riverside County Sheriff's Department. Once again, she was appointed by Chad Bianco himself. Now, Misty Reynolds was never known to be a good law enforcement officer, meaning that she wasn't good at her job. She is Hispanic, despite her married last name. She's no longer married, but her last name with Reynolds is not her real last name or her maiden name. And about 10 years ago, she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. Now, if you know anybody that has multiple sclerosis, or you know about the symptoms and the things that it can cause, body tremors, weakness, fainting, etc., again, this is somebody that should have received some type of medical retirement so they could move on with their life and focus on their medical condition. However, instead, she has been promoted again multiple times since this diagnosis. I believe when she was diagnosed, she was a lieutenant within the department. She is now a captain, or she was promoted to captain, and now she's been appointed to chief deputy. Now, she still has to carry a firearm. She still has to go do qualifications. Well, what if she were to have a accidental discharge because of her, her illness that she has, the multiple sclerosis? I mean, these are things that should concern every member of the public, and not just the public, but also the other law enforcement agents that work around her, because she should not be in a position where she's carrying a firearm. It's absolutely absurd, and it's, quite frankly, it's dangerous, and it's completely negligent that the sheriff is fully aware of her medical condition and refuses to have her resign or to just allow her to medically retire at this point. But she wants to keep collecting that massive paycheck because these chief deputies, they're making 180, $200,000 a year. I mean, they're not hurting. So for her to be still receiving a paycheck when I guarantee you she probably isn't doing a normal qualification. I don't know that for a fact, but the fact is she has a pretty severe medical condition, and at some point somebody has to probably say, "Hey, look, we need to accommodate this, or you need to go." So it's again another accommodation made, because I believe the reason why Chad Bianco even promoted this woman in the first place was not due to merit. In fact, when she was the captain over the thermal sheriff station, that was the timeline when Chad Bianco won his election. And at the onset of him winning the election, she had a knee-jerk reaction, and she sent a email to the entire thermal station, which is very bizarre because normally they just do that for specific things. And this was an emotional email. And it started off with, "Well, now that I'm never getting promoted to chief, I guess I'm stuck here with you guys." Like, she was pissed, completely unprofessional. It's not what you do. You don't do that in a open forum like that where every single person, I mean, clerical staff, evidence text, people that don't need to be seeing this shit. This is an email you would send to a friend, or somebody that is a confidant that's close to you in the department. Maybe, but even then, I would use my personal email, not my work email that everything is tracked on. And she blasted this out to everybody, just bitching and complaining about the fact that Chad Bianca won, and every time he changed any little policy, she would bitch about it. Whether it was good for the deputies or not, she would just come into the briefing room and start bitching about it to everybody. It's completely unprofessional. However, despite her very vocal opposition to everything and anything related to Chad Bianco, he still promoted her. And now that she is on the second floor as a chief, she's an at-will employee. He could get rid of her at any day now, and everybody knows that when you get appointed to a chief deputy or higher position, you could be let go without cause any day. You no longer have union protections. Yet she's still there. So that's a big problem. Then we're going to move on now to another chief deputy. Now, this guy, this guy is Kenneth Reichel. He's a chief deputy who was appointed again by Tad Bianco under his tenure. And it's interesting, actually, the history behind how they became friends. So, years ago, this now chief deputy was a sergeant that was in charge of a task force that was tasked with doing a gang injunction in the city of Coachella. So, I won't get too much into how that stuff works, but a gang injunction essentially is they basically make it impossible for gang members to wear their gang colors, fly any kind of gang stuff. in the city. If they're caught together, they can be arrested. It's actually a complete waste of money. And there's studies and plenty of documentation that shows that it's a waste of money. They spent $2 million on this project actually, and all for nothing because the gangs are more rampant than ever. So it did nothing. So back to him. Back when he was running this team, he's been friends with high ups for a long time. His family goes way back in the Coachella Valley. They used to run a paramedic service out there before what is known now as American Medical Response (AMR) took over and pretty much took all of the paramedic services for the country under their wing. So because of that, his family came from some kind of like old money and connections politically, etc. Well, he ends up going out with the captain at the time over that thermal station, who that person actually got fired for sexual harassment and a bunch of other stuff. And ultimately, he got his job back, but then he resigned because he had already moved on in life and found a different career path. However, now to kind of paint a picture for people that don't understand the hierarchy of the rank system in the sheriff's department, the captain oversees the entire station, whether that be a jail, a courthouse, or a patrol station. So while Kenneth Reichel goes out with the captain at the time and another person I can't remember, he ends up getting into a DUI, driving under the influence with alcohol, crash. And it's on camera and he flees the scene. So now it's a hit and run DUI. Luckily, nobody was injured. It was a property damage type of crash. So they do their investigation. It happened in the city of Indio. Now the city of Indio has their own municipal police department, the Indio Police Department. They're not attached to the Riverside County Sheriff's Department. So naturally, they do a thorough investigation. They determine that it's a Sheriff's Department employee, and they start doing their investigation promptly, and they do it properly. They don't cut him any slack. He ends up getting in trouble, and at the time, they had a maximum what we call, back in the day with law enforcement, if you got in trouble, they used to do a thing called day. They used to call it days on the beach because you would basically get days off without pay. Well, now they don't like that because it's almost like you're being rewarded for getting in trouble. So what they do is they slash your pay, they say $20, $30 an hour for a certain period of time. So we get paid every 2 weeks. So sometimes you might get your pay docked for 4 pay periods, so 2 months. At the time, they had a maximum punishment ability at the time of like I believe it was 120 or 180 hours. That was the maximum they would do. And usually, if something was so egregious that it went past that, you were probably either going to be demoted or you would be fired from the sheriff's department. Well, again, because this guy has connections and he's friends with the right people, none of that happened. They actually created an entire new level of discipline scale and they made it a 360-hour hit for him, which equated out to 1 full year of docked pay. So he was still getting paid. He was just at a lower rate than his normal rate. But additionally, another punishment the sheriff's department likes to dole out is what they call highway therapy. So this individual, Kenneth Reichel, lives in the Coachella Valley. They said, well, we'll send him to the Hemet station. That's a pretty gnarly drive. There's really no fast way to get there. If you take freeways, it'll take you forever. If you go through the hills, it takes forever because you're driving through mountains and it's not an easy route. So it's punishment in the sense that you're stuck on the road forever. You want to drive home at night to see your family, and you're wasting a ton of money in gas. So while he was assigned to this Hemet station, another person was assigned there. That was, at the time, Lieutenant Chad Bianco. So they start to commingle, they start to become buddies, and next thing you know, they're now thick as thieves. Now, after I'm sure there was promises made when they started their friendship that because they had the same views, they liked the same music, all that kind of stuff, that hey man, I'll bring you up the ranks. Just ride it out. Make sure you campaign for me. Make sure you're there by my side, and I'll take care of you. Which has happened. At the time, he was a sergeant when he got his into his DUI traffic collision, and now he is a chief deputy. So he was promoted to lieutenant, captain, and chief, all in the time that Chad Bianco has been sheriff. Now, Chad Bianco likes to, for all intents and purposes, he likes to act as though he is this white knight for law enforcement, and that he believes that all corruption should be pushed out and that bad cops, blah, 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 this and that. Well, that doesn't seem to be the truth, because here we have Misty Reynolds, who used to have sex with her subordinates in her office. This is a very well known fact by anybody that has worked in the department, especially in the East End, in the Coachella Valley area. She has now been promoted to chief and sits alongside him on the second floor administration. Then you have Kenny Reichel. Kenny Reichel, again, while he may have been a good cop, he makes poor choices outside of his employment, getting into a DUI crash and leaving the scene, making it a hit and run crash, which is a misdemeanor unless somebody's injured, and also driving, under the influence, another misdemeanor. This man has now been promoted again and appointed to chief deputy alongside those ranks. Now, I can imagine that if the organization known as MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, were to know about this, I don't think they would look kindly upon this, because the whole idea of MAD is that we work in conjunction, law enforcement. When deputies do, or deputies or sergeants, or whoever, whatever assignment you're in, let's say like a traffic cop, right, that rides a motorcycle, or sometimes we have traffic cops that don't ride motorcycles, that are in cars. They strive to be the number one deputy in the county. They have like this competition that if you get the most DUIs, sometimes it's at station level, sometimes it's department wide level, but they will give you this award from none other MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And it's their way of showing support for law enforcement, saying, hey, you guys are doing a great job. You did all these DUIs last year. You probably saved countless lives, et cetera, et cetera. Well, they give these awards to deputies and department members in Riverside County Sheriff's Department, yet they have a chief deputy who has been involved in a driving drunk crash and was never held accountable for it, minus having to drive an extended period of time, and had his pay docked for a while. But he was not demoted, he was not fired, because most people, if you were a teacher and you got into a DUI crash, you lose your teaching license and your life is ruined. If you're a registered nurse and you get into the same kind of situation, your life is ruined. You do not get to go back to being a nurse, working your cushy job, making great money and having benefits and retirement, etc. So why is it that department members in the Riverside County Sheriff's Department get to live free and clear, commit crimes, sexually harass women, plant drugs, be former gang members, and still get to have the title of deputy sheriff attached to their badge, and then continue to get promoted after all these things have come to light? You want to talk about corruption, then? That is corruption defined. Do you have any questions about any of this stuff?
You've heard the other whistleblower interviews and Michael Lujan a couple of times. I mean,
Yeah.
why is it so bad there? Why is it so corrupt? Why is it that, I mean, is it just a leadership? I mean, it sounds like this has been going on prior to Bianco even.
Oh yeah, this has been going on for decades, and it needs to be rooted out. I mean, this can't go on, because at some point you're going to reach a point where the public no longer has trust in the law enforcement agency that serves them. I mean, I know you've seen the video of the deputy that pushes his way into this poor woman's home and then proceeds to slam her on the ground and arrest her. Obviously, you heard that those charges were also dropped. because they were erroneous, just like the charges they tried to place against you, calling you an assassin. I mean, it's absolutely disturbing that a sheriff can get up on a podium one day after they arrested you. Nonetheless, it wasn't like he did this press release or this press conference that same day without having all the facts, which again is another issue. Instead of doing what he should have been doing on that day, Sheriff Chad Bianco should not have been in the audience for Trump that day. What he should have been doing, because he has a president, a former president who has they've already tried to take his life twice. Once by centimeters, they by God's grace did not kill him. He should have been in the command post for that event, and he should have been getting firsthand information. And he should have gone and seen you for himself and actually talked to him and like, hey man, what is going on? Why do you have firearms? What is going on here? And if he would have just listened to you talk for maybe 5 minutes, he would have been like, guys, this is not what you guys are claiming to have here. Instead, he took it upon himself with all the information at his disposal. And listen, we have counterintelligence teams in the department. They could have known everything about you within about 30 minutes. And they could have known, hey, Sheriff, this is not what the deputy is saying. Instead, he doubled down on that. And it didn't just affect you. I saw the whole thing about your parents. I mean, that's fucking despicable that there's law enforcement agents going to the house where your elderly parents live and harassing them. For what? What could they possibly have to say about a man who has created a business, who is out here trying to make America better any way that you can? Instead, he wanted to further his political agenda. I'm sure you now know, well, I know you know that he has aspirations and very large goals to try to run for governor. He'll never win, but the fact is, he has those goals, and I think and I know in my heart that the reason why he decided to make you this pawn in his big, large game of chess was so that he could appear to be this white knight for Donald Trump. And Donald Trump sees through bullshit quick. That's why he's cutting people left and right from his ranks all the time, because he sees things for what they are. He's not going to allow this snake to be in his administration. This guy would bring down that administration so quickly and so poorly that it would be one for the history books, because his entire career is just rooted in corruption. That's all he knows. That's all he has seen. And not only seen, he now puts it out there for the freaking community to see while he stands at a podium and tells blatant lies. I mean, watching that press conference was hard to stomach, man. And that's when I first started to reach out to you, because I was like, this man needs to know what he's up against. You don't deserve that. The guy that was executed for selling drugs in Lake Elsinore didn't deserve that. All these countless people that Adonis Glasper planted drugs on, they didn't deserve that. When does it stop? When is the Department of Justice going to get involved and do a deep dive on the corruption and the lack of accountability that has been going on for probably damn near 30, 40 years in this agency? And it's reached a point now where you, I think you get to the head of the snake when you have a elected official who has access to all of the possible intelligence agencies and um, different resources that law enforcement has, especially as the head sheriff, and he's willing to sit in front of all these networks and just lie his ass off. I mean, that's when you've reached a point of no return. I don't even know if Riverside County Sheriff Department is worth saving at this point. How do you fix this? You have to start from the top, and you have to weed everybody out, and you have to say, we have a new mandate. That mandate is that we do our job with integrity, we do it with honesty, and We serve the people. We stop self-serving ourselves, because that's what he did on that day where he damned you and your family to hell and blasting your name all over the fucking media because he wanted to further his agenda. It's all about him. And I'm sure you've already heard our motto, service above self. That changed when he took office. We never used to have a motto like that. He wanted that to be the motto. Well, he sure as hell isn't living up to his own motto that he's blasted on the side of every single patrol car. Every window of every station is service above self. Yet this man has done nothing but serve himself since he took office. Are you aware that he negotiated a $70,000 annual raise for himself through the Board of Supervisors? Do you know that?
Yes, yeah, actually, I thought it was more than that, but yes.
Yeah, it was a little over that, but I'm just giving a ballpark figure. But the fact is, what kind of elected official makes it their first mission when they get elected to say, you know what, I deserve more than $265,000 a year? His salary is now almost on par with the president of the United States. I can't even wrap my head around that. A man who runs an entire country, and the risk that comes with that versus a guy who sits on the second floor of some administrative building in downtown Riverside, making almost the exact same amount of money. You want to talk about corruption? That is corruption.
It's absolutely insane, man. It's absolutely insane.
Yeah. So additionally, as it relates to Sergeant William Feebig, now some of these text messages um, were leaked online about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and almost instantly the department took action and they placed him on administrative leave. Now, as I had addressed earlier on when I was talking about Sergeant William Feebig and his infatuation with drinking alcohol, after he was placed on administrative leave for disciplinary action pending because of the vile things that he was saying about Misty Reynolds, the chief, about wanting to have her shoved into a wood chipper and saying that he was going to box the under or one of the assistant sheriffs at the time and knock him out, and that he didn't care if he got arrested because he's not afraid of jail, et cetera, et cetera. He, while on administrative leave, already in trouble for these things that he said and not being able to go to work and whatnot, he went out and got into a driving under the influence alcohol crash, and he left his car at the scene and fled the scene. This just happened a couple weeks ago. So again, what's going to happen to him? Is he going to be demoted? Is he finally going to lose his rank within the department? Is he going to be forced to retire from the department? I mean, I don't know what's going to happen with him. But the fact is, this is a common reoccurring theme with this guy. He was already assigned to the courthouse for the reasons that he had gotten a DUI and was charged criminally. So he was on timeout in his assignment. And then he gets in trouble after, not only that, about 9, 10 months ago, he was sent to the prestigious Sherman Block leadership training. Now, this training is well revered in all businesses and private sector, government, etc. And they gave him this appointment for some reason to allow him to go to this. It's a very expensive school. It's about an 8-month training. And they put more faith in him, saying, oh, this is a great guy. Mind you, they gave him this appointment to this training immediately after his timeout was up at the courthouse for getting a DUI. Now, I can't imagine the Mothers Against Drunk Driving, the MAD organization, will be glad to know that somebody who's out there risking the lives of innocent people because they're selfish and want to get drunk and drive around town is being treated as though he is some wonderful person and being sent to this amazing, prestigious training. But the best part about this training is when he graduated this training, the department will present you with a plaque or a certificate that they make a big deal about because it's this long training. Well, none other, who was the person that was presenting this award to him? None other than Misty Reynolds. She would, unbeknownst to her, in the picture that I have that I can provide to you, and you could pull it off the internet yourself as well from the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, they presented him this award, and both him and Misty Reynolds are smiling ear to ear like they're the best friends in the world, because she doesn't know that she is standing next to and actually touching, literally rubbing elbows with, a man who wishes that she could be shoved into a fucking wood chipper. That's how bad the problem is in this agency. That's why nothing gets done also, is because you have people that will look you in the eyes, they will smile, all the while they're hoping that you could be fed into a fucking wood chipper and murdered. That's how people act in this department. One minute you're talking with somebody, and the next minute they're rat fucking you behind your back, because how they really feel about you is that they wish you were dead. It's disgusting. And we shouldn't have people in positions of power, especially not in supervisory roles, where they're going to then taint the minds of the people beneath them. Because that's just me that I know about, where he was telling me these types of things in text messages. Imagine how many people he has told this to, where he feels this way. I mean, you're talking about a cancer that's just going to keep growing and growing and growing because he wants to address his personal insights about department members while he's hammered off duty. It's absolutely disgusting. I encourage, to anybody that is in the department that wants to come forward and maybe needs to feel a little bit of courage, or get some kind of pep talk, or direction on what to talk about or where to go. Obviously I'm maintaining my confidentiality through this podcast, but as I've told you before, feel free to when people reach out to you, give them my name. Allow them to reach out to me, because I want to see this go as far as possible. I'm sick of it, and it needs to happen. If that means that I have to lose my job with the sheriff's department to further the greater good, if that means they have to clean house and start over, then so be it. Because you can't have this kind of corruption just running rampant in a society. It will infect everything that it touches, plain and simple. So I urge you, if you're a department member and you're listening to this, do the right thing, come forward, report what you see, otherwise it never happened.